everyone and welcome back to my channel. This video is my review for the 8th episode of the final season of The 100, or the beginning of the prequel. The backdoor pilot is finally here and I thought it was amazing. This was such a great episode that had me hooked immediately, so CW better pick this up. This was one of my favorite episodes of the show. I think it definitely lived up to the hype. Pretty much everything we knew was wrong, but we got to learn so much more about the backstory of the show and I loved it. The plot of the episode was that the Shepherd, now revealed to be Cadigan, the leader of the Second Dawn, had Clarke and her friends captured because he believed that she was the key that he had been looking for. Then, through flashbacks, we got to see the end of the world and how the universe of the show came to be. We started off this episode right where we left off, with Clarke and her friends finally arriving to Bardo, only for Gabriel to tell them that Bellamy was dead. I'm so glad that we got to see a bit more of a reaction from Raven, rather than just her looking over at Clarke. Miller told Jordan and Nyla to hold the door, and it makes sense that it would be them because they knew Bellamy the least, so they wouldn't be as affected by the news. I thought it looked like Clarke was going to fall on her knees for a second before turning over to look at Raven. Apparently Lindsay thought of doing something like that at first, but after talking to Jason, she decided it was out of character for Clarke. I thought it wasn't at first because I kind of wanted her to go all one-headed on the disciples, although I guess that's what they did with Echo. But yeah, Lindsay's right because this scene once again showed Clarke putting others first instead of her emotions, because she went to check on Raven and the focus on Clarke's face really captured her emotions. Clarke promised Raven they would save the others to honor Bellamy, which was a nice moment, but then we had the arrival of the Shepherd, now revealed to be Bill Cadigan. Once he walked in, he once again told him to call him Bill. However, Clarke recognized him from back in Season 4 when Yaha told him about the bunker. Nyla asked Clarke who he was in 3 so that he wouldn't understand. But he did, but he says that the dialect has changed over time. So this is the first confirmation that we got that Cadigan's daughter, Callie, was the one that created the language, which clears everything up because, like other people had said, it was unrealistic that a whole new language would have formed in that time, but it already existed. Knowing that his daughter's language survived, this led Bill to believe that his daughter was inside the key, which Gabriel revealed to be the Second Dawn's name for the flame. So Gabriel is redeeming himself. I hated him after he betrayed them in the other episode, but now he looked over at Clarke as if he was telling her to play along, because the disciples think she still has the flame in her head. If only they knew that the flame was destroyed. I kind of thought the reveal of what the key meant was a bit disappointing. I was also confused for a second about why they thought it was her, because if they only looked at Octavia's memories up to Season 3, then how did they know who Gabriel was? But I had completely forgotten that Diosa was also put in MCAP. So as Cadigan leaned in to ask Clarke if his daughter was in there, we switched over to our backdoor pilot with a flashback to the day of the first PREQUEL. I thought that the flashback was going to be a bigger part of the plot, like maybe Clarke would put Cadigan in MCAP and that's how she would see his memories, but instead it was just a simple flashback. So now into the amazing new show. It's amazing how close to current events the first scene was, especially because this episode was done a while ago. Callie and her friend had just gotten back from a peaceful protest that they said was turned violent by the police, and on the TV they said that there was a Russian virus spreading. So does this mean that the apocalypse is coming for us next? They also mentioned that the Wallace administration had been the ones that sent the cops to the protest, which is cool because it's setting up the conflict between Mount Weather and Tree Crew. Because as we can see from the friend's shirt, Tree Crew was originally an activist group called Tree Crew, and I love that part. Callie's mom came in telling Callie that she had to take a hologram call from her dad, who was trying to convince her not to drop out of MIT to become an activist. So as we can see, she's a genius, which makes sense with how she created a whole language when she was a child. We saw how Callie and Bill had a rocky relationship, but during their call, Bill was interrupted for a second and sirens started going off as Bill warned Callie and her mom about Anaconda, which we found out was the code word for when the missiles went off, meaning the PREQUEL was happening. I was wondering if maybe they were gonna change it so that Anaconda was English for PREQUEL since they were changing some things, but I guess not. Callie and her mom had left the Second Dawn, but since they were Cadigan's family, they would still be going to the bunker, but they had to leave Callie's friend behind to die since she wasn't part of the cult, which made me kind of hate the mom. As they arrived, Callie's brother Reese was happy to see them, but behind them was someone else who was trying to get his girlfriend to be accepted in. At first I thought he said his sister, so I immediately thought he was gonna be the new Bellamy, but obviously I was wrong. I was really surprised that the world ended that early into the episode. I was thinking we would get to see more of their lives before the apocalypse. Then with Bill, we saw that he had already taken the Anomaly Stone, which he stole from Machu Picchu, although he claimed it's not theft because it was left there for humanity. And he defended fascism, so obviously he's the bad guy. Callie was mad at her family, so she went to the exit where she found the other guy, August, who was planning on escaping, and they decided to do it together and fill the bunker with as many people as possible. Then they had a moment where they realized that they were both part of Tree Crew and compared their scars, and this immediately made me think that they were going to be the new Clarke. Like I said before, he reminds me of Bellamy, although his appearance is more like Murphy in the early seasons. But the part I hate is that he also reminds me of Finn, and I hated Finn. They were stopped from escaping by Reese and the guards, and we learned that Reese is loyal to Cadigan because he wants Cadigan to love and respect him like he has always done to Callie, who he is jealous of. Based off this and some parts later on, Reese reminded me of Wells with his loyalty towards his father, although he was also a bit like Bellamy in early season 1. But he better not be killed off like Wells was, although of the new characters he was also the most annoying. Then I was surprised that they had a 2-year time skip because there was so much they could have done with that in the prequel, but I thought the 2-year sign in the ground looked cool. So now we saw the arrival of Becca on Earth as we had seen before, but now we learned that Callie, Reese, and a few others were the ones that saw her land. Callie was fangirling over Becca, and they were all surprised she didn't need a helmet to breathe outside. But it turned out that one guy's suit had a hole, so he was contaminated and he was dying. While Reese went to get Bill, Becca gave him the cure, making him a Nightblood. Then when she finally met Bill, Becca started hearing the anomaly stone and in a few minutes was able to do what he couldn't do for years. She turned off the noise but also released the anomaly stone and opened it up. That scene looked really cool, and now we see why he needs the key, because Becca was the one that knew how to open it. Bill immediately wanted to go in, but him and Becca agreed to do the science first. Meanwhile, she offered to turn everyone into Nightbloods. But because of his stupid huge ego, Bill refused because he wants to be the one that is seen as the savior, which he has gotten used to in these past 2 years, and he couldn't have Becca ruin that for him, because he hated that she was smarter than him. Later on, while Becca was studying the stone, Callie came in to tell her a plan to turn everyone into Nightbloods, and Becca brought up how Allie 2.0 was her penance, not the planet. Even though they were talking about the actual myth, I still thought about Arrow when they mentioned Prometheus because Damien is on the show and I just keep on thinking about it because I can't see him as anyone else. Anyway, Becca sees this as her punishment for causing the end of the world by creating Allie, so I guess it makes sense that they didn't change it so that Cadigan was the one that made Allie do that, which is what I was expecting, but that would have ruined Becca's character. She realized that some of the symbols don't make a noise and she was able to open up a white light that took her away. Once she returned, Bill and Reese were there with Callie, but she showed up in a different side of the room. She said that she had witnessed Judgment Day, but Bill said that already happened, which she denied, saying that he wasn't ready for it. Since she was freezing, I at first assumed she went to Nakara, but her reaction made it sound like it was something worse, which could be the same thing that Murphy saw last season when he died and went to hell. And I don't remember if this was ever resolved, but maybe it's also what Jordan and Russell saw that they were talking about. Maybe she time traveled because the green light results in time dilation, but we don't know what the white light does. I felt so bad for Becca throughout the episode because she was trying so hard to save humanity and she was so happy and fascinated by what she was learning, but I knew eventually we would have to see Cadigan kill her. He had her locked up for 5 days until Callie came to warn her that Reese had found her journal and knew about the flame. Becca told her the phrase she needed to lock it so that she would be able to choose the next commander, but then Reese came and took Becca, leaving Callie in the cell. Then we saw the full version of the flashback Maddie had back in season 5 as Becca was burned at the stake by Cadigan. I hated seeing her suffer, and it seemed like Reese felt bad about what he did, but he didn't redeem himself because he took the flame. Callie went after him in the bunker with her army of Becca's followers that she had been turning into Nightbloods, and we got the first fight in the pit like the ones that Octavia would have in the future. It ended with Callie shooting him in the shoulder, making him a Nightblood, and taking the flame. Callie's mom didn't want to go with her because she wanted to see a new world, but she did help them escape as Bill tried to stop them. It seemed like Bill had forgiven the mom and was hugging her, but then he pulled on Abby and basically did their version of floating her like she did to Jake. So yeah, he's a horrible person who only cares about himself, although in the present it seems like he might regret his actions, although that will probably change once he finds out that Clarke is not the key. Reese still kept on being loyal to Bill and promised he would get the flame back since he's a Nightblood, meaning he will probably be the antagonist if the prequel gets picked up, which would result in a good dynamic between the siblings. Considering he's against everything Becca and the Commander stand for, I really like the theory that he forms as Geta. It doesn't really matter, but he was also wearing blue, which fits with a Geta. Finally, we saw the new Grounders leaving and going back up into the ground, and meanwhile the disciples entered the anomaly and went to Bardo. I kind of expected Radioactive to be playing in the scene as a reference to the pilot, but it was another song. We also saw that the mom had not died, and it kind of seemed like Reese regretted his actions as he looked at her. Then we saw the Grounders having a fire, and it seems that Callie was hoping it would guide her mom to them. Also, she didn't put the flame in her head, which was surprising because at the beginning of the episode I thought that this was setting up for her to become the first Sheiheda, because while Becca was technically the first Sheiheda, she didn't really lead them. It was more like like she inspired them and they worshipped her instead of Bill. But instead it looks like, as Jason said, Callie's going to become the first Flamekeeper. As the flashback ended, we returned to Bardo, where Clarke followed Gabriel's signs and pretended that she still had the flame and that Callie was in there. She also mentioned how Bellamy was her best friend, so that's probably not good for Clarke. But then she asked Bill to bring in her friends and Gabriel opened the door. The 3 disciples came forward and revealed themselves to be Octavia, Diosa, and Echo, who have completed their training. But the first thing I thought was, where the hell is Hope? But it also looks like they were either brainwashed or they've completely become loyal to Cadigan, and I hate that because this is convincing me that what I said last episode was right, and Echo is going to die because loyalty is her flaw and she's now loyal to the disciples. Overall, this was one of my favorite episodes of the season, and I think it's one of the best episodes of the whole show. But one flaw was that it felt really rushed at times, like with the 2-year time skip, and the acting from the kids was a bit weak, but that should improve. My only concern from the actual show is that it would feel like any other Apocalypse show, while the 100 has become something bigger. But the show looks amazing, and I really loved all the characters, which is thanks to Jason and the writing team, who do a great job at making me care about new characters. They've always done this, like this season with Sheiheda, Nelson, Hatch, Levitt, and Nikki. And other examples are Lexa, Luna, Rowan, and Diosa. This episode also felt like the early seasons of the show. I think I would give this episode a 9.5 out of 10, or maybe a 10, because it was nearly a perfect episode, and I really want the show to get picked up. I'm kinda more interested in the prequel now than I am in the rest of the show, although it looks like next episode we'll get to see the Crystal Giants of Bardo, so that's cool. Now let's talk about Sheiheda. So this episode we learned that the reason Cadigan wanted Clarke is because he thought she had the key, or the flame inside of her, meaning that she would have the commander's memories, which he needed in order to open the stone and finally understand the anomaly, since they've been studying it for so long and haven't been able to figure it out. However, Clarke doesn't have the flame and it is actually destroyed, which would ruin his plan. But there could be an alternative or two who are the actual key, and those are Maddie and Sheiheda. As we have seen throughout the season, even though she doesn't have the flame anymore, Maddie has been drawing the commander's memories, like the picture of Wanheda or the one of the anomaly opening up, which leads me to believe she could be the key because somehow she still has the commanders inside of her head, so she would know how the anomaly works. Then Sheiheda is the other previous commander that is still on the show, and I think he could be the key. We don't know for sure if he still has the other commander's memories. We know that he does remember about Lexa and how she died because he's jealous of her and thinks that love was her downfall, but she was a commander after him, so that's different. But even then, he might remember something or be able to work the anomaly, which means that Cadigan would need him, forcing him to come over to Sanctum. I like this because it would explain why we have the Sanctum plot going on, which has gotten a bit slower and seems separated from the rest of the stories, so this would combine everything. There is also the possibility that there will be conflict between Sheiheda and Cadigan because they both have a god complex and they want to be seen as the saviors. Sheiheda wants power and he wants to be loved and respected like Lexa was, and seen as the one that saved the clans and brought them together. Meanwhile, Cadigan wanted to be seen as the wise savior of the human race, which is why he killed Becca, so that she wouldn't take that from him. So their huge egos would clash if they met. And maybe it would result in the war they keep talking about. Since Sheiheda has been building his army, all he needs now is for one crew to follow him. Well, that's it for this video. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe for similar content. I do reviews of this show along with Stargirl. Leave your thoughts on the video or the episode in the comments, or if you want the prequel to happen, or who you think the key could be. Thanks for watching and have a good day. Goodbye.